Angelina Jolie, the name that commands attention, the face that defined an era, the woman whose presence on screen feels almost untouchable. But what if, behind the beauty, the power and the global admiration, lies a story so complex, so emotional, it reshapes everything you thought you knew? What if the journey that made her one of the most recognizable women in the world was also filled with pain, loss, and decisions that came at an unimaginable cost? Because this is not just a story of fame. This is a story of identity, of searching, of surviving, and of carrying burdens that the world rarely sees. Born into Hollywood royalty as the daughter of Jon Voight, her life seemed destined for the spotlight, but from the very beginning, it was far from perfect. Her parents separated when she was young, leaving her to be raised primarily by her mother, who struggled to provide stability while navigating her own challenges. And that early sense of instability created a foundation marked by emotional distance and a longing for connection, a longing that would follow her into adulthood, shaping her choices, her relationships, and her understanding of herself. Growing up, she often felt like an outsider, even within an industry that thrives on attention. She has spoken openly about feeling different, about battling insecurities, and about the internal struggles that came with trying to find her place in a world that constantly judged her appearance, her identity, and her worth. And those struggles deepened during her teenage years, leading to periods of self-destructive behavior, moments that revealed a deeper pain, a search for control in a life that often felt uncertain and unpredictable. But even in those darkest moments, there was a spark, something that refused to let her fade away completely. And that spark found its way into acting. Following in her father's footsteps, she entered the industry not just with expectation, but with a need to prove herself, to carve out her own identity, separate from the legacy she was born into. And her breakthrough came with roles that showcased not just her talent, but her intensity, performances that felt raw, real, and impossible to ignore. Films like Girl, Interrupted earned her critical acclaim and an Academy Award, establishing her as more than just a rising star. She became a force. But success did not silence the internal battles, because fame often magnifies what already exists beneath the surface. As her career soared with blockbuster hits like Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, she became a global icon, a symbol of strength and allure. Yet behind the scenes, her personal life was filled with complexities, relationships that played out in the public eye, marriages that ended under scrutiny, and a constant sense of being watched, judged, and misunderstood. And perhaps one of the most defining aspects of her journey is her transformation beyond Hollywood. Her work with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees took her into some of the most vulnerable regions of the world, exposing her to human suffering on a scale that few in her position ever witness. And that experience changed her perspective, shifting her focus from fame to purpose, from personal struggles to global impact. She became an advocate, a humanitarian, a voice for those who often go unheard. But even that transformation came with its own emotional weight, because witnessing such hardship leaves a mark. It changes how you see the world, how you see yourself, and how you navigate your own life. And then came one of the most personal and deeply emotional chapters of her story: her decision to undergo preventive medical procedures after discovering her genetic risk for cancer. A choice that required immense courage, a choice that sparked global conversation, but also revealed the depth of her fear, her responsibility as a mother, and her determination to take control of her future even in the face of uncertainty. And that moment highlighted something profound about her journey: the constant balancing act between strength and vulnerability, between public image and private reality. Because while the world saw a woman making bold decisions, there was also a human being confronting her own mortality, her own fears, her own need to protect the people she loves. And as her life continued to unfold, her relationship with Brad Pitt became one of the most talked about stories in Hollywood, a partnership that seemed to represent stability and connection, but eventually became another chapter marked by separation, legal battles, and public scrutiny. A reminder that even the most admired relationships can face challenges that the outside world cannot fully understand. And at 50, the reflection on her life carries a different kind of weight, because it is no longer just about the roles, the awards, or the public image. It is about the journey, the moments that shaped her, the struggles that defined her, the choices that required strength beyond what most people can imagine. And that is where the heartbreak becomes most evident. Not in a single event, but in the accumulation of everything she has experienced: the childhood instability, the search for identity, the battles with self-doubt, the pressures of fame, the emotional toll of relationships, and the responsibility of using her platform for something greater. And yet, through all of it, she has continued to evolve, to grow, to redefine what her life means, not just to herself, but to the world. And that is what makes her story so powerful and so deeply human, because it is not a story of perfection, it is a story of resilience, of navigating a life that is constantly under a microscope, while still trying to hold on to something real, something meaningful, something that goes beyond the surface. And at 50, that perspective becomes even more significant, because it reveals the depth of a journey that is still unfolding, a journey that continues to inspire, but also reminds us of the complexities behind every public figure. Because behind the fame, behind the beauty, behind the recognition, there is a person who has faced pain, who has made difficult choices, who has carried burdens that are not always visible. And that is where the true emotion lies, not in what the world celebrates, but in what it often overlooks. The quiet battles, the moments of doubt, the decisions that shape a life in ways that cannot always be seen. And as she continues to move forward, to create, to advocate, to raise her family, there is a sense that her story is far from over, that there are still chapters to be written, still lessons to be learned, still impact to be made. And that is what gives her journey its lasting significance, not just the milestones, but the meaning behind them. The understanding that life is not defined by a single narrative, but by a series of experiences that shape who we become. And in that truth lies both the inspiration and the heartbreak of a life lived in the spotlight. The weight of everything she has lived through does not simply fade with time. It settles into the quiet moments, the spaces between decisions, the thoughts that come when the cameras are gone, and the world is no longer watching. Because for someone who has spent a lifetime being seen, the most defining battles are often the ones no one ever witnesses: the responsibility of raising her children, while carrying the emotional residue of her past, becomes a daily balancing act, one that demands strength but also honesty, because she has made it clear that her greatest priority is not fame or legacy, but the well-being of her family. And that shift reveals something deeply human beneath the image of control. There is a constant effort to create stability, to give her children the sense of security she once struggled to find. And yet, even in that commitment, there are challenges, the pressures of co-parenting, the scrutiny of every decision, the reality that her life will never fully escape public attention. And still, she moves forward, choosing to focus on purpose rather than perception, continuing her humanitarian efforts, speaking for those without a voice, and using her platform to push for change, even when it comes at a personal cost. Because advocacy is not just a role for her, it is a responsibility, one that connects her to a world far beyond Hollywood. But with that connection comes emotional weight. The stories she hears, the realities she witnesses, they do not simply disappear. They stay with her, shaping her perspective, deepening her understanding of pain and resilience. And as time moves forward, there is a quiet recognition that healing is not a destination. It is a process, one that unfolds slowly, shaped by reflection, by growth, by the willingness to confront both the past and the present. And in that process, there is strength, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that exists in persistence, in the choice to keep going, to keep evolving, to keep finding meaning, even when the journey feels overwhelming. And that is where her story continues, not in perfection, but in progress, in the ongoing effort to build a life that reflects not just who she has been, but who she is still becoming.